Carmilla brings readers on an entertaining journey behind the curtain of rock and roll in his book, Backstage Chronicles. And that's a vivid collection of eyewitness tales from decades on the road. Drawing from his storied career as a tour manager, working with legends like Cat Stevens, Miller weaves together wild anecdotes of his own and of his friends, from a missing 75 grand to losing a Rolls-Royce, to famously getting stuck in a lift with Steve McQueen and meeting Salvador Dalí. And he tells all this with backstage candor and insider intimacy. And this book offers a rare, richly textured look at the music business from another side, which makes you realize that Spinal Tap is actually pretty much the truth. Carl Miller, welcome. Now, we're obviously going to talk about the book Backstage Chronicles. It's a very entertaining book. I have to tell you, I laughed out loud quite a few times, and it's all about what happens behind the scenes of bands. But I want to start off with you because, you've lived a long time and you've obviously had a long association with music. But I just wondered what your association was when you were very young.
How did we start? Well, go back to the 60s and first got into music as you do as a kid. And I remember the first time I really got the bug for it when we were getting into American music, blues and stuff like that. And a couple of friends of mine, we'd heard of this band were playing a gig, and they were doing a Butlins holiday camp. And the band was called Rory Storm and the Hurricanes. And they were there for the week, and so were we. And the drummer was a chap called Ringo Starr. And anyway, we got talking to Ringo, because he wasn't in the Beatles in those days. I mean, he was just, a chap, like one of the lads. So that really got me. I got the bug from that, and then I started hanging around with a band called the In-Betweens, who later they eventually split up and became a band called Slade. The other half got the job of being a backing group for American vocal acts like the Temptations, Four Tops, that kind of stuff. And I'd been hanging around and picked up a few tricks, and they asked me if I'd join up with them and go out with these bands. I said, sure, we'll pay you about £3 a week, no problem, I went along with them, and as a consequence of that, I bumped into a guy a couple of times who worked for a band called The Move. He recommended me to a band called The Foundations. Got the call from The Foundations, who were looking for someone, would you be interested? Yeah, we'll pay you £20 a week. Well, whoa, that's a nice one. So that from there, it sort of evolved from there, Steve.
So when you saw Ringo Starr, how old were you?
Oh, I'd be about 16, I guess, 15, 16, something like that.
So
yeah,
was there anything else you could have done? I mean, you were obviously at school, but I just wondered, was this something that just came along and you thought, okay, this is for me? Or were you actually, thinking about doing something more normal, I suppose the word.
Well, I mean, yeah, as you do, you dip into this and dip into something else. Nothing really sort of floated my boat, as they say. But my family are quite musical as well, so that I always had music on my mind. But the rock and roll, of course, the Elvis was the king for me when it first started. So that's really got it. And and just going to see a couple of bands around, and and chatting to them, I kind of thought, well, it looks like a good life. I mean, the girls fancy you, that sort of stuff. Oh, and you get paid. I mean, because in those days, Steve, nobody thought it would last forever. It was, everybody say, oh, rock and roll will be here today and gone tomorrow. Of course, it's still going, as we know,
Yeah, but parents were also a bit different. I remember, like, my parents thinking that having some form of creative life was the kiss of death.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to earn money. Do you know what I mean? You choosing a career to, or choosing to go on tours with bands at the beginning, you choosing that is, I would think, for parents, oh God, what's going to happen to him?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I didn't get that. I didn't get any resistance from my parents or anything like that. I guess they thought, well, he looks like he's enjoying himself, so fine. And I think they thought, most parents in those, it's a fad. It'll go off, Yeah, leave it alone, and he'll soon wear out the fad, you know.
Were you
Um,
prepared at 16 to encounter, and I presume, yeah, the book has a lot of stories in it which I said are hysterical, but I presume there are other stories that you can't tell. So,
oh yeah.
yeah, so I just wondered whether you were prepared as a 16-year-old to go into that world, or you felt very green when you first went in.
Oh, completely green. No, absolutely green. Yeah, I mean, naive isn't the word, And of course, you know, you don't stay naive for too long.
Oh, dear. So tell me about the thinking about.
Pennies drop, Steve.
Yeah, big pennies drop, I bet.
Yeah.
Tell me about the thinking behind the book, because it's a compilation of stories of you and also a lot of people that you've known over the years.
Yeah. Well, it occurred to me doing the book, that I didn't want it to make you the usual, artist book. We had a great show and the audience loved us and all of this, that, and the other. I thought, would it be nice to get some of the other guys in, some of the heavy lifters, and give them a bit of limelight, if you like, because, you know, quite honestly, mate, I think they've got better stories than the musicians, and the bands, because they see things from a totally different way, and a much more grounded way. They don't live in the same bubble.
Yeah. And I'm just going to give some of them a name check. I'm going to give all of them a name check. So there's Andy Cohen-Martin, music impresario manager, Alvin Gibbs, bass player, UK subs, Iggy Pop, Charles Kennedy, musician, record label, Ian Hill, bass player, Judas Priest, Jock McLean,
Yeah,
road manager, Carole King, Rob Reynolds, singer-songwriter, solo artist, Sam
yeah,
Card, who was
yeah.
a roadie for Primal Scream, and others. Now, this is Spinal Tap, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Funny you say that because you know what the original title was going to be? Spinal Tales.
Why did you change it?
Well, I know. I didn't want to. It was the publisher. He didn't think it, were related to younger people. You know what I mean? But I Spinal Tales. I mean, Spinal Tap 2's coming out, isn't it?
Yeah, what is it about the life of a rock star that makes it, sort of
Farcical.
allows it to be Spinal Tap?
I don't know. It's just the way they seems to work out. I mean, the rock and roll business, certainly in the early days, was farcical. I mean, it was as farcical as you could make it be. I mean, it's a lot more serious now. It's a serious industry now. But in the old days, I mean, it was just a nonsense. I mean, bands didn't get paid. You could turn up for a gig and the promoter would bugger off, and that sort of stuff. And this, that, and the other. So, all of those things sort of added up to making it a farce. Um, but now I guess it's a lot more serious. Because in the old days, you see, it wasn't unusual to get paid cash on the night. None of this bank transfers or anything like that. And then, of course, you'd go for the cash, after the gig was finished. And, oh, I've come to see the promoter, get the cash. Oh, he's gone. He just left.
And I suppose if you got the cash, you blew it on the same night.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Oh, it's brilliant.
yeah,
I mean, one thing I've always thought that, and because I presented on MTV and I've always interviewed, lots of pop stars and everything, and I've always felt that they were a bit sort of mollycoddled by the management, by the record company, that they didn't have to make many decisions for themselves, and it
Yeah.
sort of allowed them, and I mean, this sounds a bit rude, but it allowed them to stay children, to not grow up.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, really. Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, well, they're cushioned, as you say. I mean, one of the difficulties of being a tour manager, of course, is to actually tell them something they don't want to hear. That can be difficult, and you can't be too sycophantic, if that, you know what I mean. You've got to be a realist about certain things, and sometimes they don't want to hear it, and but you've got to hear it. This is the way it is, But yeah, I think. I mean, there's bound to be nonsense still goes on, but I wouldn't have thought it's as bad because don't forget in the old days, I mean, with the Foundations, for example, I mean, they weren't getting much money from a hit record. I mean, Build Me Up Buttercup didn't generate them an awful lot of money. I mean, these days it would, but they're only on something like 1.5% of the record as a record royalty. I mean, and so they used to gig all the time, because that's where they made the money. Because the hit record got your gig fees up.
The book starts with this story at one of the checkpoints to the east, to the east of Germany.
Yeah.
Did you always know you could talk your way out of situations?
No, no. I think it must have been a latent gift.
I mean, it's a bizarre story for the time. Do you know what I mean? There they are, smoking dope in the car,
Yeah,
and you pull up to a checkpoint, and somehow you've got to get through what could have turned into a really disastrous
oh,
situation, and you're part of it, whether
yeah,
you liked it or not. You're going to be part of it.
yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, well, in those days, of course, I mean, East Germany and West Germany were two separate countries, the communist and the capitalist. But going through their checkpoints was always a nightmare, especially with the Foundation, because they were always spliffed up. You see, they're always smoking dope. I mean, and so they would go through what the life oblivious to everything, you know, and you were the mug in the middle, having to get them out. But schmoozing and sweet talking, I think I must have learnt that being with the Foundations because they were always in trouble. There was always some nonsense going on.
I remember being told by a tour manager once, he was really pissed off when he told me this, and he said basically all the band want are me to go and buy them drugs and be their courier. And he was,
Yeah,
he said like it's such a difficult job because they think you are their bitch in a way, like to do anything for
yeah,
them.
yeah,
And that's
yeah.
the thing you
Well,
had to fight at the beginning, was it?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. No, there's some things I wouldn't do, and if they didn't like it, well, sack me, because I'm not doing it.
Well, it's one good sacking story in the book, which I love, but I'll come to that in a minute. There's a lot of humor in these stories. I mean, there's obviously one of the things about touring and being sort of a gang of people together, but is humor a sort of essential part of survival in what
Yeah,
is really a mad business?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Definitely. I think you've got to have a sense of humor. I mean, if you haven't, forget it. It's almost a qualification. To for the job, to have a sense of humour. Because, and you're always, and don't forget in the old days, it was a very blokey. It's not so blokey these days. There's a lot more females doing the jobs, but so it's a bit more PC. But in the old days, I mean, don't forget we were all young kids, and young kids are always fooling about, and doing something stupid, I mean, albeit naively, but they're always going to do something stupid. So I think, from my point of view, it made me. I think it made me grow up real quick. To get more adult about things. Because when you're dealing with officialdom, like customs and excise and all of these immigration people, and blah blah blah, you got to be You know, you've got to be quite disciplined with yourself and handle the situation.
I mean, there's got to be an adult in the room at some point, isn't there?
Absolutely, yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah, yeah. And you become it. I mean, with Iron Maiden, the drummer used to call me Uncle Carl. You know, it was like,
And you
you
were
know,
younger.
yeah,
That's brilliant. As I said, like Sam Card, he got sacked by the Sex Pistols, or specifically by Johnny Rotten Lydon. Um, and it sort of shows, it sums up really an excess of power, doesn't it, a band can have.
yeah,
And
yeah.
at a whim, they do whatever they want. Is that story representative, do you think, of a lot of that era?
I think probably a good proportion, yeah, a good proportion. I mean, and also, you know, sometimes, you know, you're dealing with people, you know, some of the bands, I won't mention any name in particular, but, you know, one band I worked with had never been outside of the East End of London, you know, when I first picked them up. And so everything was strange, you know. I mean, touring around the, you know, oh, look, cows. You know, it's cows in the field. I mean, of course, to me, I'm being born in the country anyway, you know, but you know, they'd never seen cows, you know, and things like that. I mean, I know it sounds bizarre, but they'd, you know, they'd never been out the East End of London, so they'd never seen a cow in the field, you know, things like that, you know.
How open were the friends that you have in telling their stories, and how caged were they about telling anything that might, I don't know, not kick back on these days? It's a lot of them are some time ago, but were they worried at all?
Well, I see all the people I know, you know, I know all their stories and, you know, they know mine and this, that, and the other. So, um, and it wasn't, we didn't really want to do it. We wanted to keep to the humour side, Steve, rather than the salacious or whatever. Do you know what I mean? I didn't really want to go down that road at all with it because, you know, there's a lot of books that do that. But they seem to have missed out one of the best parts, was that's, as you pointed out earlier, the humour.
Yeah, because some of them are just so, in a sense, stupidly unbelievable. Do you know what I
I
mean?
know, yeah.
Especially, I mean, I like dark chocolate as well, but I'm not going to fire anyone for a bar of chocolate.
No, no.
How did you get to work with Cat Stevens?
That was finished with the found. Well, they split up with the foundations, and then I did a couple of freelance jobs in the meantime, and then I just happened to be talking to a friend of mine who'd managed the foundations, and he managed a few other artists at the time. And so I went around there on the hope that he got any jobs going, you know. So, but he said, yeah, he said that Cat Stevens is looking for someone. He's just making his comeback, you know, because he had a pop period in the 60s and then he came back with a sort of soft rock thing, you know, in the 70s. So I gave me the number. I rang the office up and went along to the office and met his manager. And the interesting thing about that was his manager and his office weren't a traditional music outfit. His management company were theatrical agents. And his manager really didn't know much about the music business at all. But he was a good business manager, if that makes sense, you know. And anyway, I told him what I'd done, and I'd toured America and this, that, and the other, and blah, blah, blah. Loads of European tours and etc. So anyway, he sent me around to Cat Stevens' flat in Shaftesbury Avenue, it was at the time. And I went up to the flat and met the guys. And there was just him and Alan Davis, and they were routining some music. So we got talking and got this, that, and the other, and we seemed to get on all right. We seemed to gel straight away, you know. And I said, well, you know, what you're planning for the dates and this, that, and the other. And they said, well, we're going to be going out doing a tour, doing some universities at that point, you know. I said, where do you keep all your equipment and this, that, and the other? Oh, we haven't got any. I went, oh. And well, what about transport? Well, we don't have any. So But I thought, oh dear, better get on with. So anyway, I'd made up a load of contacts by then, and I nipped out to the phone box outside in Shaftesbury Avenue because we didn't have mobile phones in those days. See, you have to use a coin box, and I rang a couple of companies up, and the sound company and backline company, and this, that, and the other, and rental car, van rental, and all that stuff. I managed to put it all together for the first date, and I think that quite impressed them because. The good news is I hadn't got anything. I had a blank page, a complete blank page to do exactly what I wanted. So I got all the latest equipment that was available at that time, and this, that, and the other. And I think that really impressed Cat Stevens. And from there, it went on, and we progressed. As you know, I progressed a lot as with his progression. As you know, he got at one point. He was probably the biggest actor in the world at one point. You know.
You also helped with Morning Is Broken, didn't you?
A little bit, yeah, a little bit. That was an interesting occurrence. I was in Morgan Studios in London doing the album, and I just happened to be pottering around in the studio one day, and you know, Stevens, Steve, we used to call him Steve. You know, he's banging around on the piano and getting a bit frustrated and this, that, and the other. And I said, what's the problem, sort of thing? And he said, oh, I'm just having a real problem with this intro, you know, to this tune. And I know the tune really well because I used to sing it myself in school choirs, you know. So it wasn't, I'm really familiar with what he's doing. Morning Is Broken. I think most people had sang it at some point, you know, school choir or whatever. And I said, well, I think I know a chap that might be able to do that. And a guy called Wakeman. He's classically trained, Royal Academy. And he sort of looked at me as if to think, oh, what do I know? And he said, do you know him? I said, yeah, I've done a few things with the Straubs. He was in a band called Straubs. And I know his manager really well. It's the same guy that managed the Foundations. So I rang up Mike Dolan, his name was. I rang up Mike. I said, is Rick available to do some sessions? He said, yeah. He said, will he get paid? I said, yeah, he'll get paid. So anyway, he sent Rick along. Rick came to the studio. And just got down on the piano there, Steve, and bang, you know, a couple of minutes, he had it right down. I mean, just unbelievable, you know. Of course, Cat Stevens was thrilled to bits, you know, and of course, it's now, you know, a very well-known intro, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's it's on the same par as the Life on Mars, you know,
Yeah.
Rick Wakeman things, isn't it? It's the same thing. The thing about, if you well, you just mentioned that Cat Stevens liked, he was really thrilled about it. Was he there when Rick was playing, or did he hear it later?
No, he was there when Rick did it.
All right.
Yeah.
Did anyone think that song was going to be a hit?
No, believe it or not. I think everybody was doubtful when he first came up with it, because he first came up with it in his manager's office, and said, I'm thinking of doing this, and everybody looked at each other thinking about that. But anyway, of course, he carried on and did it. And, the rest is history, really.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. It was such a, fabulous hit and a surprise hit, I think.
Yeah, it's really one off the wall, isn't it, that one?
Yeah, I mean, it's the sort of like the Bohemian Rhapsody idea, isn't it? Like no one thinks it's going to be massive, and then later you go, "Oh yeah, of course, it's fantastic."
Yeah,
Everything's in hindsight.
And of course, it's been covered a few times as well since.
Yeah, I mean that always helps. Was the Cat Stevens when you were on tour with him, and I find this story probably, I don't know, it just because it's sort of silly and it's got this little twist to it, that being in a lift with Steve McQueen, and the little twist that you put into it. So where were you at the time?
We were in Los Angeles at the time, and just going back to what I was saying about it earlier, his manager was theatrical, so he always insisted that we stay in the hotels where the film stars stayed rather than the musicians, rock and rollers stayed. And I can't remember whether it's the Beverly Hills or the Beverly Wilshire. It's one of the two where those people go. Anyway, I just got in there. I running late one day and got back into the hotel, dro- heading for the lift. Um, just got into the lift as the doors closed and thought no more about it, as you don't, Got up about 10 floors up, I think, and the wretched thing got stuck. So I looked at this chap, as to say, oh, bugger it, here we are. And it was Steve McQueen. I thought, I said that to myself, bloody hell, it's Steve McQueen. I didn't say it to him. But anyway, we started chatting as you do when you're stuck in a lift with somebody, you can't help it, can you? And so he picked up my English accent and he said, what are you doing here? I said, I'm with a singer called Cat Stevens, thinking he might not know who I'm talking about. He said, oh yeah, I've heard of him. You see, I quite like his music. I said, well, are you coming to the show? He said, I hadn't thought about it. And I said, well, I always carried backstage passes. It's mandatory to always keep a couple of backstage passes in one's pocket. And I gave him a couple. And he said, yeah, anyway. We were probably in the lift about 20 minutes, I suppose. Eventually, they let us out, and that was that. And then after I got out, I thought that's ironical, really. How could you be stuck in a lift with Steve McQueen, whose greatest film was The Great Escape, and the Towering Inferno.
Because he didn't have a motorbike.
Yeah, and this is not in the book, but believe it or not, couple of years later, I was with another pal of mine, and I got in the lift with Charlton Heston, and he was in the Towering Inferno. and I remember that one. That was at the Piccadilly Hotel in London. I jumped in the lift, and Charlton Heston's in it. So it's strange who you meet in lifts. Really.
Stay with me for more of this interview with the author of Backstage Chronicles, Carl Miller. And if you'd like to get the book, all the information is in the text below. But there's just time to ask you to like, follow and comment. And don't forget, if you want to see other videos, just go to popthehistorymakers.com and there's a drop-down menu, which means you can find all the interviews with ease. I mean, I remember when sort of things would happen, that one thing that would go through my mind is I can't wait to tell. I mean, it's mainly the people I worked with at that time, because that's who and they understood what was really going on. And so you just couldn't wait to relay the story to friends or to people that you work with. Was that, in the sense, with tour managers and everyone that's working backstage, was that the sort of sense of fun that you could tell the stories in the bar later?
Yeah, I mean, but sometimes you did, and sometimes you just sort of dismissed it because you're sort of so in the moment of getting, maybe you're getting stressed out to doing the show, or there's something gone wrong, or you're trying to solve a problem or whatever. And so sometimes it's just those occurrences that happen to you that you kind of think, you think back later. It doesn't strike you at the time. It comes back later, Another one of those, it's in the book, it's the meeting, well, I didn't meet him, but rubbed shoulders with him a couple of times. I didn't get to talk. But amazed me was meeting the last Führer, Hitler's deputy, Admiral Donitz, I mean, quite I love my history. I'm a bit of a history student as well. So, and to bump into somebody like that, to me, was like gobsmacking. I mean, Steve McQueen, yes, but out of the two, I think running across Admiral Donitz, was just amazing. How do you do that?
What about Salvador Dalí?
I was going to give him the salute, but I thought I better not. Right.
What about Salvador Dalí? Because that's quite a story.
Oh yeah.
And also, you really saw something that was at a hotel in New York, wasn't it? That was
the St. Regis Hotel in New York. Yeah.
And you went for breakfast, and he was sitting on another table with, I think, his wife or maybe a woman. I'm not really
No,
sure.
no, what it was, what he used to do. I mean, we stayed at the hotel. We were in the St. Regis for about a week, and apparently he used to have this, what he used to call his sessions, his admiring sessions, where he wouldn't speak. He would just sit at the breakfast table, and he'd have all his admirers just come in and sit around the table, and they would just look at him. And he wouldn't speak, but his wife would do all the, answers. And of course, being naive, I was with a friend of mine who's a great artist, actually. He designed a lot of album sleeves. But he, we first time I just used to come, morning, as you do, and you in the breakfast room, and this old chap there with his, his beard and everything, looking very arty in his walking cane, and so we just every morning we just go morning, and eventually he started to acknowledge us, and but my friend, because I didn't know who he was. And my mate Joe, he said, that's Salvador Dalí. I said, who's that? I didn't know. I've got a clue who he was. He said, you idiot. It's like, he's one of the famous artists in the world. He's like, up there with Van Gogh and all of this, And I said, oh, blimey, I better treat him with a bit more respect then. It's better being so cheeky. And yeah, he was there every morning we were there. But in the last 2 or 3 mornings, he started waving at us and things like that.
But do you think that's
So I guess
because
he
it was
thought,
an act? He was being Salvador Dali,
yes,
and
yes,
that actually behind it, you were so normal in a way, in, the way that you approached him, that
yeah,
maybe it was something that he could relate to.
yeah. I think probably because I guess he was so used to being treated like this, I don't know, icon thing. Um, I guess he thought, that we weren't, we were probably not quite, with it, sort of thing, and. Because we try just like we'd say, hello to you or me or anybody else, as in the mornings, morning, as you do, don't you? Whereas all these people are just sort of, bowing and scraping.
And I think that also with the Salvador Dali, what came into my mind when I read that is that rock stars, pop stars are really set up to have an image and
Yeah,
for the public. And so that's one side of them. But you have access to all the other sides. And you
yeah,
say in that, I think it was like, don't meet your heroes, whatever the phrase is, never meet your heroes. And in that sense, that it can be disappointing to meet the real human, but were there people where you thought the real human is as good as the, projected icon?
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. I guess I see what you mean. I mean, with Cat Stevens, for example, a lot of his fans would draw his picture. He had a classic photograph on Time magazine, which is by the photographer David Bailey, and a lot of people sort of captured that and sketched it themselves and used to bring it to the backstage or try and see him afterwards and give him these pictures. So there was always people would have sketched his picture, his face and that, and it was always in a how can I put it, a quasi-religious way, and that's the way they saw him, you see. But I didn't see him like that. I just saw him as, a kid from London sort of thing, and that. But so his persona was different in that way. But the one, I think Patti LaBelle was probably one of the few artists I worked with she was Patti LaBelle all the time, didn't change. You know, she called everybody honey, and didn't matter who you were. She was just normal. You know what I mean? She was like, your big sister or your mom. She was the same constantly. She didn't have an on stage and an off stage.
Yeah, I mean that's it's refreshing in one way, but I do like these built-up icons because I think, it's actually nice sometimes to have that image of someone. With Cat Stevens, it does come across I don't know whether it's like him being amazingly nice or being amazingly naive. The story of the Rolls-Royce.
Yeah, I mean, he was quite, the Rolls-Royce one. He was quite. I mean, he was quite friendly with people. I mean, he would talk to them. And he was always quite, forthcoming in that way. And so I guess you could say that was a bit naive to that to happen. He allowed. Well, he didn't allow it. It just happened. It's just the way it went. I mean, the guy got in the car,
So he just
and
gave his Rolls-Royce to some guy on the street and said, "You
no,
drive."
what happened? No, it wasn't him. What happened was we got to the hotel, and I didn't realize at first that he didn't know this chap. He'd just, been nice to him and offered him a lift, because he was being sycophantic to Stevens and everything. Anyway, I got him into the hotel, checked him into his room, and I said, "Look, I'll leave the car outside with the driver." And this guy was still lurking in the hotel lobby. So, and I said, "I've got to get to the gig. I'll leave the car. Driver will be outside. Come down when you want to." Right. Anyway, what happened is he rang me up at the venue because there's no mobile phones in those days, and "You've got my car. I haven't got your car." "Yes, you have." I said, "No, I haven't." One of those silly bantering things. I said, "Well, look, obviously, both of us haven't got the car. I'll get you a new limo." So I got him a new limousine, and he came down. Anyway, it turned out that what had happened is this guy had gone to the driver and said, "Mr. Stevens said you can take me anywhere I want to," right? So he was a con man, and he got in this Rolls Royce, and the driver had obviously been gullible and believed him, and off they went. We never saw it again. It didn't turn up. It's probably still in the California hills somewhere, Steve.
That's fantastic. Led Zeppelin was sort of famous for like trashing hotels and having to pay loads of money afterwards, and being, they were really sort of wild at that point. And with Cat Stevens, you landed at one, the same hotel as Led Zeppelin, and Jock McClain tells a story of this huge amount of money that just disappeared.
Yeah, yeah. Well, see, in those days, it wasn't unusual to pick up cash for after the concert. I mean, not like it is now, where it's all transferred electronically and all the rest of it. It was quite a usual thing to pick up cash because you were paying your crew as they went along in their cash per diems and this, that, and the other. So you needed what they used to call the road float. Anyway, apparently that poor old Richard, he put it in the hotel safe the evening before. Following morning when they're checking out to go somewhere else, it's gone. Hotel were mystified, so was everybody else. But anyway, I guess that's the way it happened. But the good news is the band were, they knew that is Richard's character, if you like, and let it ride. But things like that, it wouldn't be the first time it's happened.
But it was
I've heard a few stories
$75,000.
yeah, yeah,
$75,000. And they just said,
yeah,
"Yeah, we believe you.
yeah,
It's okay."
yeah. Well, there's not much. What can they do?
No.
What can you do? I mean, he's gone, isn't it? He's
Yeah.
not there anymore, Steve. So what do you do? I
It's
mean, it's not
amazing though.
like you can't insure cash.
It does suggest that it was also an era which was a bit like the Wild West of rock. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
yeah,
Was it that?
yeah, yeah. It really was. Yeah. I mean, I would imagine. Well, I know for a fact it's a lot quieter these days, but in those days it really was. Let's have a good time. Especially in a rock band. Bands like Cat Stevens weren't so bad. They were pretty well behaved, but it always seemed to be the heavy rock bands, and then of course heavy metal. Um, But yeah, it was. I mean, there was, the drinking and drugs and all the rest of it, and everybody was whooping it up and having a great time. It was almost like, let's do it. We might die tomorrow, which of course a lot of them did.
Yeah, well, that was the 70s, wasn't it? I mean, it was
Yeah,
really,
yeah,
it was a
yeah.
really tough
It was a wild
era when you
time,
look back.
70s. Yeah, yeah, really was. The 70s were wild. I think they were wilder than the 60s, and they were bad enough.
Ian Hill from Judas Priest supplied a sort of Tom Cruise Top Gun story. I don't want to talk directly about that because I don't want to tell everyone all your stories, but it does sort of give this suggestion that fame is also, at that point, Tom Cruise wasn't really famous. Fame is a
Yeah,
sort of transient thing. And when it's
yes.
over, it's tough for people. How did fame, do you think, change some of the people you knew? And you don't have to mention names, but I just wondered if you feel that being propelled into this sort of iconic, famous strata of society really changed people. And also, did you see any people that had a really hard time dealing with the aftermath?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Some people cope better than others, of course. Um, other people had their dips, their troughs, if you want to call it that, where they would go down but bounce back. Others went down and never came back. Um, some were very sad in some cases. That they just couldn't cope with the strain and the stress. And the pressure, of course, because it's very high. Especially when you're out a few hits under your belt. And I mean, the pressure's on. Because you get pressured from all and sundry, like the record companies and the marketing companies and God knows what else. They're under pressure to do more and more and more. And with Cat Stevens, for example, I mean, we would do an album a year. And a tour with it. I mean, now it's not unusual for artists to go 2 or 3 years between albums, but the pressure was on in those days to keep on delivering and delivering and delivering. So we would tour. He would we would tour. He'd go straight, and then we'd go back into the studios, back into rehearsals, back out on the road again, and it was literally on a treadmill. And of course, that can get to you, after a while, because you can't, not from much from my point of view, but from, the artist's point of view, I'm under pressure to write another hit song. Well, how do you tell somebody, go away and write a hit song? You know, it's impossible. Write a song, but you're not going to go out purposely and write, oh, I've got to write a hit song. Do you see what I mean? There's a huge difference between, just knocking out a tune.
And also being in front of like 60,000 people on a stage with that amount of energy that's transferred to you, and then you go
Yeah,
back to the hotel. It's
yeah,
like, how do you deal with that? I mean, I knew someone, I can't say the artist's name, but a massive rock star, and she was at school with him. And he paid her to be on tours to wait at the hotel so she could treat him normally. It was like a normal
yeah,
person. So
yeah.
he could then have a chat with her and come back down to earth in a normal way. But I think, especially during that era, part of the life was to go crazy afterwards.
Yeah. I mean, if depending where you were, I mean, famous place in New York where everybody used to hang out, all the bands and the musicians and this, that, and the other would hang at a place called JP's in New York. A guy called Jimmy Pullis used to run it, and he was great, Jim. I mean, he's gone by now, but bless him. But that was a great place. I mean, he had there were three levels, but the club was only on one level. He had an apartment upstairs, and there was the cellars downstairs where all the beer was kept and all that stuff. And so, if you were in the in crowd, you go to JP's, and it wouldn't be too long before you were invited downstairs. So I'll leave that to your imagination what went on downstairs.
Another story I loved is the Stevie Wonder story because it also a similar thing happened to me. I interviewed Stevie Wonder in Cannes, and it was in this massive room. And as he walked in, he went in the wrong direction, and I had to shout out, "Over here, Stevie," for him to
Yeah,
turn around and come back. And then
yeah,
later, years later, I read his mother's book where she talked about how he used to prank people like Diana Ross at Motown by asking other people what she's wearing today. And they would say, "Oh, she's got
yeah,
this red dress on." And he would go up to her and say, "Red really suits you, Diana." You know, so, so and what
yeah.
I loved
He
about
was,
your story is that it is like the
yeah,
height of the
yeah,
fun that he
yeah,
would actually have
yeah.
with people.
Yeah, he was always he liked his prank. I guess he's still the same sort of chap, he liked his pranks and his jokes and fooling about. But that was one of that's great, if you like that all the time, it doesn't half make a difference, backstage, especially if you've got somebody that's not stressed out, but we're having a good time, that really helps.
Well, I think what he did, he would actually take away your nerves. Do you know what I mean? By
Yes,
actually ridiculing himself,
yeah,
he would actually
yeah,
make you feel more comfortable. And
absolutely,
and that's just genius.
yeah. Yeah. Oh, he is. I mean, he's an absolute genius. There's no question of it. But the great thing is, he's a nice genius.
And there are some that
You know.
aren't there? That's the trouble.
Well,
You know.
and we both know it, don't we?
So
But we won't
looking,
go there. We
no,
won't go
I mean
there,
I don't want
Steve.
to be. Yeah. Looking back, do you think that this sort of the sheer chaos, the lost fans, the border bribes, the missing teeth, the vanishing Rolls Royces, Stevie Wonder driving, was all this what made road life on the road magical? Or do you wish, in some sense, that you had had a calmer ride?
No, no, I think I prefer it the way it was. No, I don't think. I think it's those things that really make it what it is the nonsense that goes on because when you're touring, it has to be farcical because of the situations you're in. That things are bound to occur that are either going to be go wrong or go right. Simply because of the situation, as I say. But no, I think I prefer it the way it was. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's different now. I mean, technology's improved an awful lot, over the years. I mean, that's evolved. Things have evolved, and I think, to be honest, I think the last gig I went to, I don't really do go to gigs anymore because for some I can't cope because I feel like fish out of water. But um, well, I used to have this philosophy where I used to have fun backstage. I used to like to have a party atmosphere going on backstage because my thought was if people are having a good time backstage, that will transmit itself to on stage and it'll be a good show. Um, so that was my philosophy. But now when I've been backstage in recent years, excuse me, everything's so sterile. There's no humor, there's no banter. It's as quiet as a mouse. Everything's like it's like a clinic on some of the shows I've been to backstage, and I'm not sure I'd want to be involved in a show like that where it's all you watch your P's and Q's. You know.
I mean, one thing that came across for me was that you often appear like you're the one that has to save the day. But was there ever a time when your intervention actually made things worse?
Probably, probably. I used to try and avoid, those kind of confrontations. I think one of the things you have to do is be a bit of a politician in the business, especially in the tour manager. I think diplomacy is a key ingredient, an essential tool in your kit bag, to have. So I used to try and avoid it, but I'm sure there must have been one or two occasions.
Yeah, I mean, also,
I remember trying to, excuse me, trying to interject between an argument with one artist and a promoter, and that didn't go down too well. And so I thought, well, I'll back off and let him get on with it, you know.
yeah, there must have also been a time when, you've got to have some sort of loyalty to the band or artist. And
Sure.
then maybe something happened where, I don't know, the loyalty to your own conscience, or maybe even the loyalty to the law came up.
Yeah.
Was that something where you felt you would have to turn a blind eye to, or were there sort of areas where you would confront someone?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, there's some been occasions when I would say, look, knock it on the head. You go out of order. Many a time, especially when they've been on the drink, and the other substances. Calm them down. Because you know what people just lose the plot, don't they? So I mean, that's happened on many occasions, I can assure you, where I've had to calm a few people down.
I mean, that's a tough choice, isn't it? Because
Yeah,
job depends on it.
yeah, and of course, you're thinking to yourself at the same time as you're trying to calm these people down. Well, is he going to be pissed off with me now? And that's it, But yeah, you have to do what you think is right at the time. If you're peeing on the artist's strawberries, tough. Because some people don't like being told, as and it's one of the jobs, being a tour manager, where you have to do that sometimes, and they may not like it, but you got to do it.
I also think when you say some people don't like being told, a lot of artists are in a position where they don't get told. And
Yeah,
so for the person, the one person that comes up and tells them, it makes it even tougher.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's happens a lot, and of course, it's always your fault as the tour manager. You're the first one in the firing line. It's always your fault. You know, um, so you have to accept that as part of the job. That you're going to get the blame for something. So you have to have your cards well stacked. To prove that it's not your fault, it's somebody else's fault. But you have to go through the gambit to get there.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Well, Carmilla, you survived. You survived the 60s and 70s. You survived through, I mean, you and your friends have come up with some amazing stories. It's a great book, Backstage Chronicles, a great read. And as I said at the beginning, there's a lot of laughs, some of them definitely out loud laughs. And I wish you much success with the book. So, Carl, thanks for joining me.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Up there is an interview I recommend. Down there is where you can find all the podcast interviews. And here is where you can connect.